Hey, Mr. Reid, this is Chris and Jesse. We are going to answer the questions from the students at Pathfinder School in Louisville, Kentucky. So you sent us some questions. The first one was, what convinced you to settle in Alaska and choose the lifestyle you live, knowing that there are inherent dangers from cold and bears?
We were both born and raised in Alaska, so living in Alaska is something we've always done. But going out to the Kosna and chasing after that lifestyle, it really came to us once we got together. And our very first trip out there by snow machine, we went out to this old cabin, and we just fell in love with the lifestyle. And for me, there's just nothing better. As you can see in our background, it's just beautiful here.
Snowing?
Yeah, it's snowing and it's nice out. We got our dog out here. She's jumping around chasing after mice.
Her whole face is covered in snow.
It's just a great lifestyle. Just living off the land and subsisting, not punching a time clock all the time and going to work every day. It's still fulfilling in other ways, like going out and getting your firewood. So I have a lot of fun.
Yeah, I mean, I love being out of the Kosna. I think it's a totally different experience, and you get to learn about totally different things than you do in the city. And I didn't think that it was something that I would grow to love, but now it's something that I miss every day when I'm not there. So the second question is, how do you adapt and prepare to live in an Arctic environment? Was it hard to adjust?
The biggest thing is dress in layers upon layers. So I'm always in several layers. That way when you're standing around, you don't get cold. And then when you start working, you just peel some layers off. For me, it's much easier to dress for the Arctic climate than it is to dress for a hot climate. Whenever I visit my folks, they're down in New Mexico. I go to see my mom down there. It's just gruelingly hot. We have to get up before the sunrise and go out and do our hikes. But here, we can hang out all day long and we can do stuff and we just put more clothes on. So for me, it's really easy to adapt to the cold.
I agree. I think that it's a lot easier living in a colder climate than hot climate. I mean, basically all you can do when you're hot is get into a pool, I guess, if you have that type of money. So I prefer this type of lifestyle for sure. Okay, so the third question is, do you have access to technology?
Well, out at the cabin, we don't have much. We bring our cell phones. There is no cell service, but what you can do is download offline maps, and then you have an interactive GPS. So that's really helpful for us. That's something that my dad didn't have. We also have a satellite texting device. I have unlimited text, and so I'm always texting my family. I text them every day.
I don't.
Yeah, she's definitely the grump in the cabin.
Ever.
I'm really social. I really like talking to people. And so the hardest aspect for me being out at the cabin is not having my buddies to chat with or my dad to ask questions to. So I'm definitely always texting back to town and asking questions. But as far as like internet or real technology, there's nothing out there. We finally got a solar panel and a couple car batteries that we're running the house off of. We have 5 LED strips in the entire cabin, and that lights everything up. All of our headlamps are all rechargeable. So it's really big for us to have a solar bank that we can charge things off of. Our first year out there, we did diesel lanterns, and it was terrible. We broke all of our lanterns throughout the winter, and we had 1 lantern and 2 headlamps that we were doing everything by. But our headlamps ran off of AA batteries, and we were limited. And so there was a lot of nights where we had a very dimly lit headlamp. And so there's just not a lot of technology out there. Actually, one of the big things that we've added in the recent years is a washing machine. I'll let her tell you about it.
The washing machine. Yeah, out there doing laundry, I just have to boil water on top of my wood stove, and then I pour it into a 5-gallon bucket. And then I use kind of like a metal plunger to wash my clothes in the bucket, but you have to like wring them out, and that's how you get them clean. So my hands are always like burning. I have to use hot water out there because we're doing a lot of hunting and a lot of butchering. A lot of animal fats like get deposited on the clothing, and you have to have hot water to get that stuff out of there. So laundry is it's tough. It is super difficult. It's the worst thing for me to do out at the cabin. Okay, so the next one. So question 4, what is life like adjusting to being on a reality show? Does it interfere with your daily schedule?
The main thing with being on a reality show is that everybody recognizes you. And so when we go into the city and we go grocery shopping, or if we decide to go out for breakfast, we'll just sit down at a table and we're sitting there eating breakfast, and somebody will come up and they're real friendly and they know all the details about you. They're like, hey, Chris, hey, Jesse, how's your dog Tozy doing? How's your dad Stuart doing? And they'll sit down and start enjoying breakfast with us, kind of hanging out like we're old friends. And I've had several concussions, so I have a hard time with my memory, and I just assume that I know them, and I kind of just play along, and finally they'll be like, oh yeah, big fans of the show, and they get up, I'll tell my wife we saw you, and I'm like just mind blown. This person just sat down and carried on a 30-minute conversation with me, and I had no idea who they were. So that's interesting when that happens. The other day we were at Goodwill looking for some winter clothes, and some guy saw us, and he came running around, and he just arms wide open, grabbed a hold of Jesse, grabbed a hold of me, gave him a big hug, and he was just thrilled to see us. And so it was pretty fun running into that. It can be confusing at times, and you don't know what's going on. I never think people recognize me from TV.
I think the biggest adjustment is just having people out at the Cosna, because it's usually just us, and there's nobody for 100 miles, and so to have a crew of people out there is an adjustment. You know, to have their drones flying over the cabin when I'm not expecting it, and GoPros, you know, that's just an adjustment because I'm used to being solo and just being out there and not having other people around. So I think that's the biggest change for me. All right, question 5 is, what is a normal day like for you? Do you have a schedule?
Mostly when we're at the cabin, our schedule is built by the weather around us and what chores I have to do. So it's not like I have a set schedule. I don't write it out a week in advance. I look at my wood pile and I go, tomorrow I need firewood. And so I know that all day long I'm going to be out getting firewood. Or when the water runs low, I know that the next day I'm going to be chipping up ice and getting water from the river. And so it's not like a set schedule, but there's definitely stuff we need to do. One of the biggest things we have trouble with is trying to get all the chores done with the daylight.
Yeah, I mean, we know that we have to get up before the sun, especially like this time of the year. And as it gets into December, I mean, you got to get up before the sun so you can get all your inside chores done. So as soon as that sun starts to peek over the horizon, which it doesn't quite do for a couple months out of the Cosna, that's your time. You know, even though it's just twilight for a couple hours, that's the only time that you have to get outside, get everything cleaned up, go and get your water, go and fell your trees and do all of your wood chopping. It's just a lot. You always have more chores than you do light in the day. So you know that you're always going to be busy, and that's kind of how you schedule your time. Okay, so question 6 is, how many hours of daylight do you have? What's it like during times of dark periods? Is it an adjustment?
Right now we still get quite a bit of daylight. Sunrise, I think, is at 9:30.
This is as bright as it gets today. This is it. This is our high noon, like top of the day light right now.
We're getting sunrise around 9:30 and sunset at about 4. It'll curb down still a little bit more. We're losing light for another month and
so
a half.
We'll lose like 6 minutes a day or something.
It'll get down to about 4 hours of light, and you know, depending where you are, like we have this hill behind us here, and the sun will come up and get stuck behind the hill, you know, and not rise. And so we fight that out at the cabin a lot, where we don't get really any yellow light for, I don't know, a couple weeks. We just get blue light. And the first couple of years out there, I started going cabin crazy, and I would go out and just cut trees down, just trying to get 1 more minute of sunlight. If I could cut 200 trees down and see the sun for just a minute, I was going to do that. And what I mean by cabin crazy is when you're cooped up in a cabin at 40 and 50 below, and it's just dark in the cabin, it's dark outside, and you're not getting any sunlight, you get really vitamin D deficient, and you start to get anxious, and the anxiety starts to build, and you feel like you're trapped, and you have to get out and do something. And there's nothing really to do other than cut firewood. And so I bring the chainsaw in, and I warm it up next to the wood stove, and I go out and cut firewood until it ices up, and then I bring it in and thaw it out and go back out and cut more firewood. It's really dangerous to cut when it's dark out, but you got to do something to ward off that cabin crazy.
I just paint a lot, but I think more than the cold. I mean, the cold you can dress for, but if you're not used to losing all the light and being in darkness for like an entire month, that's going to be the biggest adaptation that anybody is going to have to overcome. It is a big deal. So our first year, when all we had was those kerosene lanterns, it was tougher than I could have ever imagined. As soon as those lanterns get hot, and if you kick them or if they fall over for any reason, that's it. The glass breaks, and then you can't use that lantern anymore. And the light from a kerosene lantern, it's not strong, and it dissipates really fast. So it only like lights up a very little bit. But changing over to LED headlamps and having like an LED light strip, even though it's so small, going in and being able to like press a button and seeing light, it makes a huge, huge difference. Our next question is, for students who go to school, what sports are played year-round? And then, do you play sports?
There's always soccer. So soccer's played throughout the summer, and then we have indoor soccer in the school gyms if you're into town.
There's been some American Ninja Warriors that came out of Alaska, just because, you gotta chop the wood and you gotta do everything kind of manual labor out here. So you get tough. But I would say sports, there's just not as much opportunity, and it's also quite expensive. To play hockey here it's really expensive. So I think that's maybe why soccer is kind of the preferred interior sport. I know that a lot of villages are also into basketball.
There's a lot of really good teams that come out of these small villages. They don't have a lot to do other than play basketball all winter, and they are good.
Yeah. Our eighth question. So our eighth question is, how do you get together with family to celebrate holidays? I would say this is pretty unique to us.
Yeah, we live so far out that you can't just hop in a car and drive anywhere. It's about a 4 to 6 hour snow machine ride to the closest village from our cabin. And if you're lucky enough to have someone come and pick you up, then you can jump in a vehicle and take off from there. But if you don't have anybody coming to that village, you just take the snow machine all the way to town. It takes about 2 to 3 days. You got to camp out. You got to expect it to be between 40 and 50 below on the river. Sometimes it's cold to 65 below with the wind whipping. And so to get to town could be quite the ordeal. In the summertime, it's even worse. We go by boat, and it's really difficult to get down the river with all the log jams. But we always try. We always try our best to get out from the Kosna to go see our family around Christmas time. We've traveled by bush plane, which we have to go, and we stomp out a runway that's 1,200 foot long on an 1,800 foot lake. And then we put down little markers, and we make
Takes days.
Yeah, takes a few days.
Takes a couple days. You have to travel by snow machine to go out to the big lake that's large enough for a tiny bush plane to land on, and then you have to put in the whole ordeal. I mean, it takes a long time, but when you haven't seen anybody in months and it's beginning to be a lot like Christmas, we just get on our texting phone and we try to get a hold of somebody that has a bush plane and see their availability of coming and pick us up. It's pretty expensive for a tiny bush plane. What is it, like $800-900 to drop in?
Yeah,
So,
and a lot of times these little bush planes can only carry one of us at a time. Our airstrip is really short, and so when they come in and land, they need a lot of braking room because they kind of dive in out of the mountains. And so they send these little itty-bitty planes. And I would say the majority of the time we get picked up one at a time. And you're looking, between $600 to $800 per trip out there. Sometimes you can finagle a deal, and we can get to a town, both of us, for about $1,000. But then you just come back out by snow machine when the weather clears up, and it's not too bad, and it's worth getting to town.
all right, so question 9. How is climate change affecting the culture and lifestyle of Alaska? The wildlife, caribou, bears, beaver, trapping. How is it affecting your lifestyle and seasons?
Well, it seems like Alaska's always changing. We don't see climate change as much up here, I think, as other people do. One of the big things that we can visually see is that all of our glaciers are melting, but we still have really cold winters. I think last year was actually Fairbanks is one of their coldest winters in a long time. And so we're still getting really cold up here. Our seasons have changed a little bit, depending on our snowfall and rain in the middle of the winter has been the biggest change for us. In the last, 10 years, we've gotten a lot of rain during December. Last year we got 4 inches of rain, and it puts a big ice layer on top of all the snow, and then snow falls on top of it. And it makes it really difficult for the caribou and the moose to travel, and all the sheep that are up in the mountains. They can't kick through that ice to get down to the vegetation to eat it, and so we have mass starvations of herds where they go out and die off.
Which is what happened this last winter.
Yeah, and That's just been happening, though. It's the cycle of Alaska. I don't think it really has too much to do with climate change. The biggest change for us up here has been with commercial fishing. They're doing trawling, which is where they essentially rake the bottom of the oceans and they take up everything. They catch everything and then they dump out back into the ocean what they don't use. And then those boats travel back down to places like Seattle and sell it in the open market. And it's gotten so bad here that they had to cut down all subsistent fishing on the Yukon. So these indigenous people that have been living on the river for generations and generations, and they've been able to subsist off the salmon run, they no longer have a fish source. And since
that's their main food source for them, their families, all their dogs, everything.
Yeah, you think about these guys that have dog teams and they need to go out and go trapping to catch fur to be able to sell it to make money, or they are in dog mushing where they breed dogs and they make champions and they sell those dogs. Either way, you got to have those fish and those fatty oils to run those dogs, and they just can't do that. You know, and Fish and Game's been trying to keep up by giving personal subsistent permits for things like whitefish, but you can only get a handful of whitefish. These guys need thousands upon thousands of fish to make it through the winter. And so it's been a huge impact on the Alaska culture here is the commercial fishing, way more of an impact than any kind of climate change for us.
Yeah, and crabbing this year, you know, the crab boats, the whole season's shut down. So Alaska is seeing a lot of closures in both hunting and fishing, and it's doing a lot of damage to the people that have lived here for a long time, whose ancestors have lived here. And whose entire way of life is kind of, I guess, getting erased and getting pushed to the wayside.
Let's see. When we're out at the cabin, Jessie makes all sorts of crafts and she'll be painting and she collects those things up and brings them back to town. But we do all of our business transactions when we're in Fairbanks. So the few months a year that we're in Fairbanks, we fire up a web store and we just get to making crafts. I make knives and she makes, well, everything. And she takes care of all the online store, which you can find. We've got a couple things still active there now. And as we go into the Christmas season, we'll have more. This is the time of the year we try to make our money before we head back out.
But all of you guys could do this. It's super, super simple. You can get free websites or really inexpensive websites. You can do it through Facebook, social media. So if any of you guys are interested in like painting or even making like classes, digital things, physical things, creating and teaching, you can find a platform that's really easy to use. It works for everybody. So I highly suggest, if you have that kind of attitude that you want to start your own business, it's easy, guys, and you should definitely do it. And it's fun.
It's fun.
Yeah.
You find a hobby and turn it into a little bit of profit, and you got yourself your own business.
Yeah, I never thought that just making art, you know, would be able to pay my bills. I thought it was just something that I could do that made me happy, right? But if you guys find something that makes you happy, or if you're interested in it, it literally doesn't matter what it is. Like,
yeah.
I know somebody that takes pictures of snowflakes and sells those. Do you know what I mean? You can make a business out of anything that fuels your passion. As long as you're interested and you want it enough, you can make it happen. It's easy.
Here's my tiny little workshop. Here is a few knives that I'm currently working on. This is a hand-forged blade. I've got, I don't know, probably 30 hours in this knife. And these are just blanks that I've picked up. And I'm making into different types of knives. This is a skinning knife.
All right, so I just threw these cups. They're still wet. I'm going to trim them, decorate them, put a handle on them. These are some spoon rests that I made. So this is a little halibut. And these are the state of Alaska. None of these have gone through the kiln yet. And then these are some finished mugs. Well, haven't gone through the kiln, but these are decorated and all done. So that's the 8 stars of gold, the Alaska flag. And then when they're done, I'll add gold onto the stars. So this is a third firing to add the real gold on there. And then this is our cabin right there. Just impressed. I made my own stamps and they're good to drink out of. Go after what you love, guys.